Look at the book of Daniel today, in the 6th chapter. Or Brother Jerry, I think, just say, Lord have mercy. We're not getting into the prophecy today. Brother Jerry probably knows I'd get myself out on me and cut right off behind us. It's prophecy. But we want to look at this 6th chapter. At this point in the history of Daniel, of course, he was one of those who were taken captive out of Israel, served under multiple kings, Babylonian kings. At this particular time, he was under Darius. Darius was the king. Darius had favored Daniel, found him to have an excellent spirit, and that is seems to be the common thread throughout the book of Daniel, how that the Lord has blessed Daniel, given him great wisdom, the ability to interpret dreams. He was a very faithful man unto God, although he was not in an ideal situation. He still served God. Amen. And all the way back to when they were being fed, and he didn't want to eat the king's meats, those things that were unclean according to the Jewish religion, and requested to be able to eat lentils, the things that he was accustomed to eating, and they prospered on them. Actually gained weight, and anyway, so. But the Lord had blessed Daniel, and he had interpreted some dreams, and this caused him to be put in higher positions within the government. Ultimately, Darius thought so much of him that he had already set up princes. Then he set up 3 to be in charge of these, I believe 150, is it 150? Maybe 180, 120, I'm sorry. That should be over the whole kingdom and over these 3 presidents. So he set up 3 people to be over these 120 princes. And Daniel was the chief of them. And this caused a great deal of jealousy and animosity towards Daniel from these other men. So they concocted a way to try to cause Daniel to fall out of favor with the king. They convinced the king to make a decree to sign into law that for 30 days that no one could ask any favor or any petition of anyone but the king. So they did this because they knew in order to find fault in Daniel or to cause Daniel to stumble, it would have to be concerning his God. They knew that he was unmovable when it came to serving his God. So this is the way that they went about it, and the law stated that any man that was caught asking petition of anyone other than King Darius for these 30 days, that man be thrown into the lion's den. It says that Daniel, knowing this decree had been passed, that he did as he did every day, and he went up into his room and he prayed 3 times a day. That is what these men were hoping for, because they were watching. They knew that was his custom. They knew that he would go and pray to God, and when he did, they brought it before the king. It greatly troubled the king. It didn't make the king angry. The king realized he had been tricked in what these men had done. But under the Persian laws, the decree of the king could not be changed even by the king. So he had to follow his own decree. And he threw Daniel into the lion's den, and we're getting to the reading part here in the 18th verse. But he did throw Daniel into the lion's den. He says that even the king felt like, he says here in the 16th verse, it says the king commanded, they brought Daniel, cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continuously, he will deliver thee. And the stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Now, we want to understand that these were not pet lions. These were not just, even these that are kept up in zoos, we hear these horrible stories of the zookeepers, their trainers getting mauled, and then little children climbing over into the habitat or into the cage and getting killed. But the purpose of these lions were as a form of corporal punishment. It was a very terrible way to die, to get thrown into this den of lions, these hungry lions. They saw you as prey, and they broke you to pieces. I mean, they just mauled the people and ate them. So the thought here was that Daniel would be cast into the lion's den, and he would be mauled to death. So the king, having confidence in Daniel and in the God of Daniel, he even makes the statement that he believed that the God that Daniel served continually would be able to deliver. I think that speaks greatly of Daniel and his character and what the king had seen God do for Daniel, and what the king had witnessed in Daniel. So we'll begin here in the 18th verse. Daniel having now been cast into the lion's den, and the stone rolled upon the door and sealed with the king's signet. It says, then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. When he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Then was the king exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. With the mistakes we made, if you read on the king being angry with these men who had caused this to happen and tricked him into making this law, he threw all of them, their families, wives, children, threw all of them into the lions. And as it says that the lions break them into pieces, that basically that they just ground their bones, and they completely mauled these people as they fell into the pit. So a total different outcome for them than the outcome that Daniel had. Daniel, he experienced an angel coming and shutting the mouths of the lions. You say, well, was it a literal angel preacher? Well, yeah. Yeah, it was. The Lord sent his angel, and the angel shut the mouths of the lions. And in my mind, and it doesn't say this, but in my mind, by saying that, I don't think that they had to come and tie twine around their mouths to keep them shut. I think that it's just that the Lord sent a calm spirit over those lions, to where that they had no desire towards Daniel. He protected Daniel. He put up a hedge around Daniel, and he changed the very nature of the lions there that night. That the lions did not even do what was natural, what would have come natural to them, but they just left them alone. He just left them. Now, there's a lot of different things to be taken out of this. For one thing, I will say that Daniel didn't do anything different than he'd always done. He didn't suddenly decide to start praying to God because they had passed this law. just in defiance of the law. But Daniel just continued to serve God the way that he had served, regardless of the laws that were made. And in doing this, as he said to the king that there was innocency found in him, that he had not done, was not guilty of anything towards God, he was not guilty towards the king. That does not mean Daniel was not a sinful man, that he didn't struggle with the same things that we do. But I think that the Lord viewed him as being faithful. And what I want us to consider here is this last statement that is made, that it says that there was no manner of hurt found upon him because he believed in his God. Now, whenever we read the 11th chapter of Hebrews concerning faith, and we're given the patriarchs of faith, such a wonderful list. It's such a wonderful chapter to read concerning all the different things that people overcome by faith, by having faith in God. This is one of them that is mentioned, the stopping of the mouths of lions. It says in the first 30 or so verses is speaking of Abraham and Noah and Moses, but then he says that what shall I say more, for the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and of Barak and of Samson and of Jephthah, of David also and Samuel and of the prophets, who through faith, another way of saying believing in their God, that by believing in their God, by faith, subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. So this is one of the examples that we're given, one of this great cloud of witnesses, as Paul says in the beginning of the 12th chapter, that we have this great cloud of witnesses who have done marvelous things in our eyes through faith. They have accomplished marvelous things simply by believing in God, putting their faith in Him. And that is easy to say. When it comes to faith and thinking about truly putting our belief in God, truly having faith that God can do something, that is easy to say, but a little harder to do sometimes. When adversity is in front of us, when we are facing adversity and we are facing a problem or we are facing a danger, it is sometimes harder to just face that danger by faith than what we say it is and what we realize that it is. I find myself many times facing things, and at some point I just kind of had to snap out of it and say, I'm looking at this totally wrong. I'm looking at this about what Kevin can do and about how Kevin can control it or how Kevin can fix this. And I just have to stop sometimes and think, this is going to take God. Amen. God's going to be the one that has to take care of this and has to fix this. And so that in this next chapter, in the 13th chapter, well, a couple of chapters past that 11th, in the last chapter of Hebrews, it says here in the 5th verse, he says, let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. So how does this tie into covetousness? Because he's using covetousness here, so that makes you think of material things, and that we shouldn't put our confidence in material things, and we shouldn't live in a state of sinful wantonness where we're just constantly, we are just sick with wanting, and we're constantly desiring to gather more, and that's what our focus is on, and so that we should be content and find contentment with the very fact that God has promised that He will not forsake us or leave us. That ought to be what trumps everything else. That whether it is whether it is a sinful wantonness within us of wanting more and more, or rather it's when we're facing adversity, when we are looking around and we are looking for other ways to tackle this adversity, we need to always remember the very basic principle that we have to put our faith in God. Right. That we have to trust the Lord. That there has been such great and marvelous things accomplished through the years, and God has done such great and marvelous works when men put their faith in it. Right. Whenever men are willing to just say, I'm going to do what's right, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to serve my God, and whatever comes, God will handle it. And God will get me through it. Paul spoke of it in his own personal experiences in the book of Philippians, in the Philippian letter, that in his own personal experience that he had to learn this very principle. He says in the 11th verse of the 4th chapter of Philippians, he says, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content." Have you learned that? Boy, I ain't got that perfected yet. Whatever state I'm in, to be content in that state, that's a hard one. It is for me. Y'all might not find it as hard as I do. But Paul, and I think Paul through experience, had learned this. Well, we know that Paul through experience had learned this when you look at what all he went through serving the Lord. That he had learned that whatever state he was in, to be content. He says, I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Really? He had learned that during times of being low and being brought low, and he had learned about times of abounding and being high on the mountain, if you would. We sang a song that the God on the mountain, God in the valley, still God in the mountain. And that's a wonderful principle that we should always consider, that in our lowest moments, it's the same God that is there in the highest moments. In our best times and in our worst times, God has not changed, and God has promised that He will not forsake us, that He will not leave us, and in that we should find great strength and we should find great comfort. And it says, everywhere and in all things, I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and suffer need. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. The Scripture calls him a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. Whenever we face these adversities, whenever we face these trying times and we face trouble in our lives, we need to always remember who we are. And we are the children of God. We are those that Christ has purchased with His precious blood, and as such, He has an interest in us, and in such, He has promised that He will never leave us, and in such, we know that we always have help. We'll go everywhere else in this world for help a lot of times before we'll ever try God. And that ought to be the first place that we go. And then if God sends help through different means, and many times He does. He does on a regular basis. You go to God with the problem, you put your faith in God, and then God may send you help in the form of a person. He may send you in help in the forms of goods and things that you're needing. There's many different ways that God sends help. But we ought to stop trying to go and obtain these things ourselves, and we ought to go to God first. And let God send what we need. My personal experience is the further I get away from this principle, the more of a mess I make out of things. That the more that I try to do and the more that I try to control, more of a mess it turns into. And on the flip side of that, I know from personal experience that no matter how bleak it seems, no matter how bad it seems, that when I finally get around to turning it over to the Lord and believing in Him, and believing that He is able, and believing that He will, then things change. Every time. Every time that I've ever come to the point of getting humble enough, getting to the point that I just throw my hands up and say, Lord, you're going to have to. You know what happened the first time that I did that? Whenever I just fully just trusted the Lord, He saved my soul. He did. You say, well, that's different. No, it's not. It's the very same faith. It's the very same principle that we are to trust the Lord in all things, and that we're not to hold back on faith, but that we're supposed to put all of our faith in God. And when we do, things happen. See, what kept me from, hindsight's 20/20 a lot of times. What kept me from getting saved for so many years, I was lost for several years, was I hadn't gave up on Kevin yet. I had to do more. I had to cry more. I had to prove something to the Lord. When I finally did all I could do, and I trusted the Lord, that's when He saved me. Is that not the same principle that I'm talking about these times in my adult life, these times since I've been saved? Whenever I have tried to handle things myself, yes, I'm praying about it. Yes, I'm asking the Lord for help, but then I'm still worrying myself over it. I'm still injecting myself into the process. I'm still sure that Kevin's got to figure out the solution and Kevin's got to do it. But then whenever the point finally comes that I realize that I can't, and I finally turn it over to the Lord, when I truly turn it over to the Lord, you know what He sends back? Peace. Amen. Peace. That's what He sent the first time I did it, and that's what He still sends today. When I fully turn it over to the Lord. Does it come back with an instruction manual saying that this is your next step, and this is what I'm going to do, and then this is how I'm going to fix this, and 5 years from now, this is where it's going to be? No. What does it come back? It comes back with a clear and definite answer that I've got this, and that you went to the right place, that I'll never forsake you. Whenever we think about the things that He has brought people through, He is such a wonderful God. He is such a marvelous God. Amen. You realize that He has power over everything, right? That with Him, nothing is impossible. That even rich people, Christ spoke to His disciples about how hard it is for a rich person to get saved. And the point He was making there is because they don't want to give it all up. They don't want to turn all their trust over to the Lord because they have trust in their riches. And the disciples said, well, then who can be saved? He said, with men it's impossible. But with God, all things are possible. So that because of God, that if a rich man will trust God and believe in Him, he can be saved. That it's not impossible, that God will save all those that come and believe, that fully trust and believe. And those of us that are saved, God will always help us when we trust and believe. How many? Just go back to creation. There was nothing then something because God said there was going to be something. He spoke it. And it was. Then look at those that have served Him through the years and the things that He has delivered them from and the ways that He has done it. You think about Him bringing the children of Israel to the edge of the waters of the Red Sea, and the Egyptians closing in on them, Pharaoh and the Egyptians closing in on them. And what did God do? He parted the Red Sea. That was His people facing adversity, sure that they were about to die, because looking around at the natural world, they had nowhere to go. They had no ability to fight. They had no ability to defend themselves. Their back was to the wall, so to say. It was to the sea. But they had nowhere to go, because they were looking around naturally. But then a God that controls nature stepped in and parted the waters. Caused them to pass through on dry ground. I've heard them try, I've watched shows on Discovery and history and stuff, of them try to explain how naturally this happened and how this, but not. What idiots. What idiots. God caused the water to hold back. And He allowed His people safe passage through it. How many times in your life has God held the water back? How many times in your life has God stepped into a situation and He has said, right here, child, walk right through here, I've got it covered. And then overflowed your enemies. Yeah, because it's not always about just getting you safe to the other side, but He so many times He overcomes your enemies for you. How does He do it? Well, how can He not do it? He's God. It's not hard for Him, these things that we look at Him and we think, oh, that's impossible. What a foolish thought for us to think. What such a foolish thought for us to think that something is going on in our life and in our world right now that is impossible for God to fix. Right. I think a lot of times of Elisha, whenever that Syrian king, he got angry because every move the Syrians would make against Israel, the Israelites was always ready for him. He said, well, how's this happening? And they said, well, there's a prophet by the name of Elisha. Why, the Lord's showing him what you're going to do, and he's telling the king, telling his king. He said, y'all go and you get Elisha. Elisha and his servant was seemingly surrounded by this Syrian army. The servant, fearful, looking around at the natural, right? I think that's our problem as the people of God, is we live too much in this natural world. We live too much in this natural world. We only look around at the natural things, and we only look around at our abilities to do things and but see, Elisha, he lived in the spiritual world. His servant said to him, Master, what are we going to do? They've got us surrounded. 6th chapter of 2 Kings, 15th verse says, when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, a host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. What a statement. What a statement of faith right there. There's more. Yes, we see this great army. Yes, we know they've got the city passed about. But son, there's more on our side than what's on their side. This young man couldn't understand that. This young man, I guarantee you when he said that, That this young man's first thought probably went to the size of the army that was within that city, or the people that were, it just probably went to the natural. It says that Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee open his eyes that he may see. The Lord opened the eyes of the young man. He saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. So here's this prophet, his servant. Prophets didn't carry weapons. Here they are. Syrian king's armies are surrounding the city they're in because they're coming after them. Young man scared just like every one of us would be, because he was looking at it in the natural sense. God didn't suddenly, when Elisha asked to open his eyes, God didn't suddenly send these angels and these flaming chariots and put them in the mountains. They were there. Amen. They were there. It's just that the young man couldn't see them until the Lord opened his eyes. Brethren, we are not alone in this world. Amen. We are not facing our obstacles and our problems alone. Amen. God knows when we need one angel to come and close the lions' mouths. You tell what it said, an angel of the Lord came and shut the lions' mouths. That's what Daniel said. He knows when one angel is sufficient. He knows when there's an army of them needed. And any way it goes, the Lord knows how to bring about victory. He knows how to get us through these things. Whether it be a personal situation in our life, whether it be a church situation, whether it be a nation, whatever it may be, we need to be more spiritually minded, and we need to believe that God is able. Because when we believe that God is able, then we'll begin to ask Him to do it. But we've got to believe He's able first. We've got to be convinced that God is capable and able to deliver us from all things. I think a lot of times about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and whenever the king gave them the opportunity to back up and to back up on their principles and to bow down to them, or to that image that he had made, and he gave them that one last opportunity. And they said, King, we'll not be careful to answer you in this matter. They knew and told him that if it was God's will, He could deliver them from that furnace. But they said, any way it goes, He's going to deliver us out of your hands. What do we hear a lot of people say? I'm a winner either way. They were a winner either way because they knew that God would give deliverance. And He still gives His people deliverance today. He is still a God of deliverance. He threw three in that fiery furnace. King looked in there. He said, did we not cast 3? He said, there's a 4th. There's a 4th one. They're in there. They're walking around. Think about this. Think about this. God has power over nature. He has power over His creation. He has power over man and has power over women. He has power over nations and kings. He has power over everything. He's God. He's God. What else do we need to know? He's God. And we serve God. They were not in there in that furnace alone. But He said, I see 3 men loose and walking around, in the 4th one has the image of the Son of God. Where is God at when we're in the fire? He's in there with us. When we're going through fiery trials, He is in the fire with us. We are not alone. When we look at it in a natural sense, we can get to feeling alone. Elijah, when he got to looking at it in a natural sense, well, Elijah, he felt alone. He felt that he was the last of the prophets. What did God tell him? He said, I reserve a remnant that have not bowed the knee. He said, you're not alone. You're not alone. We're not alone. Look up you have a concordance. Look up the term fear not sometime. Look how many times God instructs us as His people to fear not. He says in Isaiah, 43rd chapter, he says, but now thus saith the Lord that created thee, O Jacob, and He that formed thee, O Israel, fear not. Fear not. It's just one of the times. But just stop and think of that very simple instruction that we're given. Fear not. Fear not. What did Peter say? To be careful for nothing, casting all our cares upon, because He careth for you. That we're to be careful for nothing. We're not to fear. We're to cast all of these fears and these cares upon the Lord because He cares for us. Right? So he says here, he says, fear not. He gives a reason. He says, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by my name. By thy name. Thou art. Fear not. Fear not, Goodwill Church. Fear not, Kevin Slayton. Fear not, Joe Rainey. Fear not, for I've redeemed you. He loved us before we were ever born. He's redeemed us. Not with gold and silver, with the precious blood of His Son, Jesus Christ. He has redeemed us. Fear not. So I've called thee by thy name. The Lord saves our soul. He calls us by our name. Well, you know it, don't you? You and the Lord, and today, when the Lord says, Kevin, I know. You know, there's times that I've heard my daddy say my name, that times in my life that he struck fear in me. Depends on how he said it. I was in trouble, and I knew I was in trouble, and he said, Kevin, in a stern way, it struck fear in me and dread. Then there's been times in my life when my father is very gently said, Kevin, in order to comfort me, or to let me know everything's fine. I'm talking about my natural father. And whenever he has spoke to me gently, it's always brought comfort and peace to me. A safety. You know, whenever I was growing up, well, I'd have fought with him if he didn't think my daddy could have whooped his. I thought daddy could have whooped anybody. Well, y'all see him, he ain't terribly big man, but in my eyes he was. Strongest man I knew. Felt safe when daddy was around. Why? Because I knew that if somebody harmed me, that daddy would kill him. I knew that. I knew that daddy would fight for me that Daddy would make sure that I was kept safe and away from harm to the best of his ability. Right? And Daddy has limits. God doesn't.
Amen.
God doesn't have limits. So that whenever he speaks peace today, whenever he calls my name today, it brings great comfort to me. When there's trouble around me and I'm becoming fearful and I put my trust in the Lord and he sends back that, it's okay, Kevin. It brings a great deal of comfort. He says, thou art mine. What greater statement to be made to us than that we are the Lord's. That the Lord claims us. That he loves us and he claims us. He says, when thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned. Neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior. Daniel was delivered from the lion's den because he believed in his God. The Lord tells us to fear not, and he will never forsake us, never leave us. Whenever we have things in our life that seem like they're about to overflow us and overtake us, when we see trouble coming up, we're in the midst of trouble, the Lord is right there. We just have to remember that. We just have to know that. We don't need to wait until we find ourselves in the midst of trouble to start looking for the Lord. We need to be more spiritually minded, to look at things with spiritual eyes and realize that no matter how big the enemy is, our God's bigger. And not bigger by just a little bit. He is overwhelmingly bigger than our enemies. The worst that the devil or the world can throw at us is nothing to our God. He's all powerful. All powerful. All knowing. Omnipresent. What can he not do? Other than life. Which means that what he's telling us is the truth, right? That he'll never forsake us. That's our message. If you're here and you're lost, we encourage you to trust the Lord that you might be saved, that you too might have a friend stick closer than a brother. If you hear you saved, I encourage everybody to follow the Lord.